Welcome to the Surfcast Podcast. Once again, we have a super special episode for you today, an exclusive. We are here today with Thomas Czernik of Rhode Island. Well, going to school in Rhode Island. We'll get a little bit of his history in a second here. And Thomas was recently fishing in Rhode Island, and he caught, of all friggin' things, a giant tarpon. A giant friggin' tarpon. It was well over 60 inches. This was a few weeks ago now, and this is coming out potentially a little bit more than that. An amazing catch. This may actually seem to be happening a little bit more than randomly. It seems to actually be sort of happening regularly, which I sort of hope isn't true, because then my life's going to be over and I'm not going to be a surf casting for friggin' bass anymore. I'm going to be full-time out there trying to catch friggin' tarpons on eels. So we're going to get some of the details today of what happened. This is an exclusive to the podcast. There's also going to be an article in Surfcaster's Journal. But we wanted to get him on here today because this is such a special event. So special that Toby is here despite...
Yeah, I'm fighting a little bit of COVID. I was at ICAST recently, and like it seems to be just about everyone who came out of it, I contracted COVID. So would have liked to have done it sooner, but this is the first day I've really been able to sit upright for more than just a couple hours. So Thomas, I appreciate you making time for us today, and I will be pushing through this. So hopefully don't have any problems on my end, but again, I appreciate this was not something I wanted to miss. I would have deferred to Jerry if need be, but I really wanted to get a chance to talk to you, hear your story, and I'm excited.
Well, great. Thank you both for having me, and thanks for bearing through the COVID.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Spend some time with us.
Yeah, totally worth it. So, so let's get right to it. So before we talk about the tarpon and what happened that night and everything, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about your surf casting history, like how you got started, that kind of thing.
Right. So I'm originally from Long Beach Island, at least in part. That's where I grew up, and I'm currently residing in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm a PhD candidate studying geophysics and geochemistry. And I started surf casting when I was really young. I'm an avid waterman, as they say, and I enjoy all things on the ocean. This is a passion that I share with my partner, Karen Wulong, who I'll talk about later when I tell the story in more detail. But she was actually the one that probably inspired me to become a more hardcore surf caster. I am... For most of my life, my focus has been on surfing, no casting, with occasional casting, I should say. But recently, I've discovered a great passion, and I feel privileged to be part of such a cool story and to make so many good memories.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be part of surf casting history, I think. I really do. I think that this is, even if it becomes a thing, it'll be like, oh, there was that one in the 70s, and then there was the one in the fish trap, and then there was the one in August the year before, and then all of a sudden this guy caught one in Rhode Island, and then there was this one, and you know what I mean? I think it could, even if it happens. So yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So thanks for the background a little bit. So that night when you were getting ready for surf fishing, you made some decisions about where you're going to go, which we're not going to talk about, of course, where you were going to go, your sort of plan, and why you were going to do what. Can you talk a little bit about how your season was going and why you made the decision to go out that night? Was there something you noticed, or was it just a run-of-the-mill surf night?
So June was pretty rough. So the plan was to pull out the big guns and use live eels to start. And although I have an eel tank currently at home, I typically don't like to use eels for plugs. So we're gonna start slinging eels and then switch to plugs if needed. The conditions seemed good, and they were right for the spot. We we had talked to some other casters in the parking lot beforehand, and they had a similar plan. They were going to use live beels, 2 other casters, and then switch to plugs if needed. So we arrived at the lot at like 8 p.m. We took our time suiting up, waiting for it to get dark, and the rest was history. But
yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there in a second. Was it calm? Was it rough? Was it hot? Was it cold? I mean, these are things I really want to know.
Yes, yeah. So one thing that I was excited about was that it was cloudy, cool day, which I thought would make for better fishing.
Not exactly tarpon weather.
Not tarpon fishing,
No.
but yeah.
which is kind of interesting. Was there any kind of prevalent bait you saw or had heard of or something, or were you there because this is like a pattern, like this is a spot on this tide that I go to, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
There were no bait that I observed that were obvious, at least, and modest seas and modest winds. It was a calm night by many standards, and a very typical like summer or late spring night. Although it was cooler than usual.
Which is interesting. So you get to the spot, you gear up, you head out. Did you just stick it in one spot? Did you have a plan where you sort of walk in the shoreline? How did that approach go?
Yeah, so it started slow in one spot. Spent nearly 2.5 hours. And at that point, I was getting frustrated because I was like, this, under these conditions, should be giving fish. And then we decided to move. And so 2.5 hours after little to no action, maybe a modest bump. But you begin to question that after standing there for so long, and but we moved on and to deeper water, and that's where the tarpon was caught.
So you moved along after no action. So it's not like it was lights out. There weren't tons of stripers around. That's what it sounds like for sure.
No.
Okay. So you get to this next spot where you actually caught the tarpon. How long were you there before you hooked it?
I actually was counting casts.
Okay.
And I think it was on my 10th cast that I hooked up to the tarpon.
So probably like 10
relatively
minutes.
Quick.
Yeah, roughly. Or maybe if you're eeling, it's probably a little bit longer than that. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So it was like pretty much right away, we'll call it, pretty much.
Yeah.
And nothing strange. You didn't notice anything strange before you hooked it up?
I mean, other than that, it was a ferocious hit. And
but there was nothing condition-wise prior.
Nothing condition-wise prior. Just maybe an anomalously cool night. Okay. That's all.
So really. At that spot, though, there was no crazy bait, or there wasn't anything bizarre. So okay. Nope. So you're casting. The hit was thunderous. It was not like a striper bite. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, it was obvious. You couldn't miss that hit if you tried. And then line started, peeling off the reel.
So when the fish hit, did you bow to it and do the whole 9 yards, or were you just on?
No, I did bow.
Good for you.
And then it was a circle hook, and so I reeled in after, and then it started to run.
Okay,
almost immediately, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?"
Okay, so take us through that. So
yeah,
well,
okay, go.
We got the circle hook. Do you want to talk about your setup? I mean, that's jumping into my head here. You mentioned circle hook, which obviously you'd have to for the eels. But I'm interested too, like before that cast, what's your rig? What's your rod, your reel, your line? In short.
Yep. So I was on a VSX 150 and an ODM Genesis rod. I had a 30-pound braid on, and I forgot to say that's a 10-foot rod. And it was a fun fight because of that. And the braid was tied to 220-pound crock barrel swivel, which was the other end of the swivel was tied to a 50-pound fluorocarbon Yuzuri leader, and then a 7.0 owner hook.
Nice. So fairly typical. How long was your leader?
Yeah, it was 30 inches.
Okay. So that's shorter than Tobin. That's shorter.
But it's relatively standard striper setup. Yeah.
Pretty standard striper setup, though. Yeah. 50-pound.
50-pound.
50-pound leader.
Yeah.
We're gonna get to this. I'm dying. I'm dying inside. We're gonna get to this a little bit more when we talk about tarpon a little more. Okay. All right. So you bow to the cow. You set up on the fish. What happens?
Line starts peeling off the reel, and I'm like, well, this is clearly special, whatever this is. And for like fleeting moment, I think that this may be a tarpon. During the beginning of the fight, and then I started to like second guess myself like numerous times. I was like, that's ridiculous. And then the obvious thoughts of like, could this be a shark? Could this be a tuna? Come through my head. And I was as I was like fighting it, eventually maybe like 10 minutes in, I called my partner over, Karen, because I knew this was something that she should be a part of. And although I was trying to keep it quiet to not alert anyone around me of what was going on, because at this point I still thought that I had some trophy striped bass on. And she came over, and the fish took line multiple times. And at some point in the darkness, we saw the silhouette of the tarpon tail walking. And at this point, still not confident enough to say it's a tarpon.
But it jumped.
It definitely jumped, and it jumped high. More so than your average striper would probably jump.
Yeah, especially a striper that size. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were like, oh my God, what is this? And eventually, after it had taken line a couple times, and I've steered it clear from the rocks, I was able to get it with Karen's help, and Karen grabbed it and pulled it up onto the rock. And we took some photos, and the measuring tape I was carrying was maxed out at 60 inches. And so the fish well exceeded that. And we had the fish back in the water and revived it probably on the order of a minute, and it swam off well. So I felt good. And I tried to do my best to keep the fish safe and to assure both of our safety, because handling the fish on that size in the rocks was a little, sketchy at points. But
yeah. So how long did the fight last? Like, how long did you fight it for?
Yeah, the fight lasted like somewhere on the order of 30 minutes.
Okay.
Based on the pictures, I kind of like figured it out based on the pictures after, and I knew when we started casting when we switched locations.
That's a pretty well. First of all, okay. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. My next question for you is: do you have any experience with tarpon before this? None. Sir, excuse me. I'm going to get very close to my sir. Excuse me, sir. I want to go ahead and throw this out there, and I know you already know this. I'm very close to the mic, so I know it's loud for everyone. You got so goddamn lucky. I can't even believe it. It's amazing. I'm so jealous. And clearly, I mean, even as lucky as you were, you had to know how to fight a fish, because even then, there's so many things that can go so wrong. But that is amazing. Because Toby, I mean, quickly jumping over to you, you just had an experience with some tarpon in a boat. And how long did you fight those suckers for?
So the one that I hooked, I had it on for about a half hour. Excuse me. And the captain estimated it to be in the 120-pound class because of the jumps and everything else. Lost it because of a jet skier cutting my leader. We reset, and the second fish we hooked that day by someone else on the boat was roughly the same size. And after 2 hours of fighting that one, it took us around a pylon and cut us off. And that's in a boat where we could chase it down and go after it. And yeah, I mean, as you're telling that, I'm just thinking, I not to put luck on you were lucky. If I was able to get that far into the fight with the thing, I'd have considered myself lucky to have just not lost it on something by then. Like, that is amazing.
It's truly amazing. And I wish we had talked to a biologist or something, and maybe we should or something follow up on this, but maybe it has something to do with the water temperature. Like maybe the colder water temperature just didn't have the endurance or something. I don't know.
Not the 94-degree water temp I had mine hooked in Key West.
Which is what they actually prefer. Yeah, right. They like the warm. I mean, have you talked to anybody else really about this? Like, have you asked anybody who knows anything about tarpon about this at all?
Oh yeah, everyone has the same reaction.
Okay. They do. That it's amazing that it was that fast and everything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable, because I've caught my fair share of tarpon up to maybe into the 40-inch range, maybe pushing closer to 50. Tail, that's not even fork, so maybe around 40. Mid 40s, high 40s fork range. And even those, I fought a few of those for 10 to a little bit more minutes, just because of where I hooked them in the current. I know guys who have fought fish for 3-4 hours with fish that big in the surf in Florida. So it's truly, absolutely, unbelievably amazing. Do you think there was anything special that you did that night, or do you think it was just purely luck that you ended up with that? Like, what do you think?
In terms of landing the fish, I was just doing what any striped bass surfcaster would be doing, right? So, no, I think it was just standard treatment, and I made sure that all my gear was up to par. And I was ready for the fish of a lifetime, as I am every time that I go out. And I think that that's important, because otherwise you miss these opportunities.
Yes, that's extremely important, and that's a really good point. I kind of can't get over it, because I love tarpon. I really do. They've really captured me, and I'm glad I live super far away, because I could barely hold a job because of stripers, and I don't think I'd be able to hold a job at all if it was tarpon. So it's pretty amazing. Congratulations so much. Toby, do you have anything else you'd like to ask him?
So I guess it's kind of a funny question, but like, do you have and does this motivate you to want to catch one, let's say in their normal region? Like, would this make you more, before that night, did you have a goal of catching a tarpon? Has that changed in any way since? Like, is this ruined? You're like, nah, dude, I got my Rhode Island one. I'm good. That can't be beat. Or you're like, I want to get one in Florida, or, like legit homes for them.
Yeah. Literally right after, we were like, oh, we're going to Florida.
Exactly. That's great. So you've got the tarpon bug.
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. My other question for you, and I'm sure this is probably no, but have you ever caught anything else crazy in the surf like that, or was this really your first sort of wild catch?
This was my first wild catch.
Yeah.
No, I'm not an attractant for insane catches. I don't have a knack for it.
Yeah,
I do. I got lucky, and I feel very privileged to.
Yeah, that's really cool. Toby.
That reminds me, that led into a question I just thought of. So when a lot of guys get, that striped bass of their lifetime, that big striped bass, and I've been around guys that have had, absolutely massive striped bass in the surf, and that's the last cast they took on the night for whatever reason. If it was harvesting time frame and they took it and we photographed and left, or whatever reason. After you released that tarpon, did you fish any longer that night, or was it kind of like, yo, I'm out, I got to go celebrate?
Yeah, I wanted to fish longer, but I forgot my water bottle, and I was dead thirsty at that point. And I was also soaked from reviving the fish. I wish I had worn my wetsuit at that point, because I was in waders. So I was going to go back to the car, but then we got talking to the other fishermen that were there that we talked to initially, who were also at their car. And then we just decided to leave because we were chatting for a while, and they had the same reaction that you two had. So
you might have walked away from the great tarpon blitz of 24.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this makes me think too, I've got some bad news for you, Thomas. You already hit your season peak. You're not going to beat that this season. I gotta say, I'm sorry. I don't think that you're probably going to top that this season. What do you think?
I think that you're likely correct, but I was into a blitz last night and I had a blast. So anytime I'm out there catching fish, I'm having fun.
That's great. That's really good then. Yeah, that's great. So, well, we thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to talk to us about this. We're really thankful that you give us the exclusive. We're disappointed that it kind of leaked out there. We wish other people had kind of given us the chance, since that's what you wanted, not necessarily what we wanted. We were, honored that you chose us. We wish it had stayed between us because we'd been planning this for weeks. So thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And the story written by Dennis Ambrata, who did the interview of you, legendary Rhode Island angler, will be in the upcoming edition of Surfcasters Journal number 85, the one that's coming out next. So we encourage everyone to go over there, check out the story, maybe catch some details that we missed today. And we will see you on the next edition of the Surfcast Podcast. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.